junkie for church history, if you have or haven't learned that about me yet. And it's because I've heard a couple of people, I think it was a podcast I was listening to, they were talking about how church history is so helpful because you recognize that simultaneously the things that we wrestle with, try and engage with now are, maybe the phrase we'll use is ever ancient, ever new. Author of Ecclesiastes might say, there's nothing new under the sun. That there are specific cultural things that we're having to wrestle through now that other churches in history, other eras of the church have not had to wrestle with. And then there's some that are just evergreen that churches for all times and all places will have to wrestle through. And so I love getting to read and learn about what brothers and sisters in Christ have done over the generations. And one story that I always come back to is there's been a number of global plagues. You think of like Black Plague, things of that. There's one that was like kind of rampant in the 300s. And at that point, everyone is congregated in city centers, and even people that live in the country are basically, it's like outskirts of the city, but that's where stuff is. So you need to have some connection. So you're not living, it's not like these people that go, well, I live out in the bush in Alaska, and then once a month I drive to the Costco. That's like 4 hours away, and load up on everything. So everyone's inherently together, and then this plague breaks out, and it's wreaking havoc on these ancient cities. And anyone of any means at all is doing their level best to escape the cities. They are running, they're getting to the countryside so that they can have fresh air and have a chance at surviving this. And the story goes, and I say church history, but this isn't a story from church history. This is a story from history. Historians look back on this and go, this was a marked difference. The people that stayed behind to serve and love those being afflicted by this plague and many others like it were followers of a little sect of Judaism that people jokingly called the Way. Those followers of Jesus who went out of their way to express Christ-like love by meeting the needs of another. So when everyone's escaping, Christians are actually running to city centers so that they can love and serve and doctor and care for the most vulnerable. Now, the question is, what compels them to do this, to serve in this capacity? Why on earth would someone, when this disease is wreaking havoc, there's no modern medicine, it's ugly. What would possess them to go, I'm going to run towards the danger so that I can love? Well, it's the love of Jesus being born inside of them. They're being molded and shaped. We use the phrase for spiritual formation. It's being shaped to the image of Jesus for the sake of others. And so today, that's why I want to talk about the practice of service. How we serve others as Jesus followers. And the phrase that we'll use for what does it mean to serve, because a lot of things could come to mind. Service is the expression of Christ-like love by meeting the needs of another. The expression of Christ-like love by meeting the needs of another. And there's more than this, as always. This is the 30,000-foot view. We don't have time to dive into all of it this morning. But there's 4 ways that we can kind of think about this expression of the expression of Christ-like love by meeting the needs of others. I'm going to repeat that 1,000,000 times. And I want that to be kind of our bulwark or our framework this morning. The expression of Christ-like love by meeting the needs of others. So the first thing we have to think about is that our service should come from a place of love. If it's the expression of Christ-like love needs to be the The originating point of this, like I said, Robert Mulholland talks about spiritual formation is the forming of one's life to the image of Jesus so that when people look at you or me or us collectively, we look more like Jesus tomorrow than we did today. A month from now than we did today. You get where I'm... So we're being molded and shaped, but not so that people look at us and say, wow, they look a lot like Jesus, but for the sake of others, so that we can take that love and offer it to others, to reflect the person of love he's creating in us towards those that our lives brush up against. And it needs to start from a place of love. Paul says this to the church in Corinth. If you've been to a wedding recently, this might ring familiar. He's talking about all these spiritual gifts that people can or can't have and what it looks like. And all of these, I'll use the word Christianese, of like following Jesus and being a good church folk. And he says, aside from all of that, if I speak in the tongues of men or angels, but I do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, he says what? I have nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. So Paul here is defining love, like I said, as the originating point for all that we do. We can do all of the quote-unquote Christian things, but if we do not have love, they're pointless. He talks about spiritual gifts. He talks about tongues and prophecy and things that some people really want to grab hold to. And he goes, you can do that all day long, but if you are not a person of love, it's worthless. If you have so much faith that you can, like Jesus says, move mountains, but you are not a person of love, that faith is worthless. It's done nothing for you. You can then have the outward side. He talks about giving everything that you possess. Like think the rich young ruler that goes away sad. Say he does that and goes, oh, I'm doing it. I want to give everything away for the sake of others. I want to give, but it's not because of love. It's because of some sort of duty or obligation. It's worthless. He says, if I give my body over to hardship, I think of things like fasting and all that. If you're saying, oh, I'm going to do hard things, so that I can show how much I'm committed to God, but love is not the reason that you're doing it. This is Paul, not me. It's worthless. So when we serve, you can serve all day long. But if it's not from being transformed and changed into a person of love as Jesus displays love, if love is not the animating force on that service, it's worthless. We can do the right thing in the wrong way, and Paul's saying here it becomes the wrong thing. So love needs to be the starting point for us in our service to others. Number two, so our service, the meeting of the needs of another by expressing Christ-like love, should come from a place of love. And our service then is formed in a place of hiddenness. I would venture to guess that when I talk about the practice of service, for you, and it's not wrong because it's true of me, for you, what probably comes to mind is some sort of service project. How can I partner with an organization or a cause, and maybe there's a Saturday once a year where we all get together and we pitch in, or we're going to remulch the beds out here. We did that one time, and those are not wrong, but that's probably what our brains run to. And in reality, there is far more opportunities in the day-to-day life that Jesus has put each of us in to love and serve others in hiddenness. serving quietly in the ordinary moments of your lives. Now, let me ask you this. I heard, as I was preparing this week, I heard this. What do you use as the metric for your spiritual health? How do you know? What is that's thermometer. What's the thermometer for your spiritual health? There's a lot of things that might come to mind. It might be current level of perceived morality. I did right things and I did not do wrong things. I did not, quote unquote, sin. So I must be doing pretty good. Maybe for you, it's engagement in like the spiritual practices. Like I read my Bible. I prayed. I fasted. I Sabbathed. I spent time in stillness. Whatever it is. Maybe there's some sort of other metric. And what I want to offer to us today is that maybe the metric that is most helpful for getting a pulse or a temperature on what our spiritual life looks like is in the hiddenness of your life and in the hiddenness of my life. When I'm at home with my family and I stub my toe or my kids disobey or I've asked them to pick something up and they don't, what is the thing that comes most naturally to me at that point? Is it complaining? Is it being annoyed? Or is it an attitude of Christ-like love in the opportunity to serve somebody? It's a little bit like that. You go to the doctor. I haven't done this in a while. I don't know if they still do it, I guess. Maybe it's just for kids. But you go to the doctor and they hit your knee. They don't do that anymore? Well, I'm getting old. Well, you know what I'm talking about, though. They hit your knee and it's a reflex. Maybe a better thermometer for our spiritual lives is what is the reflex when you have the opportunity to serve. Tyler Staton says, what if the conditions of your ordinary life are the perfect conditions in which God can bring heaven to earth in you and through you simultaneously? That it doesn't need to look like some big service project, but that you have everything that you need to serve in hiddenness in your daily coming and going. Jesus actually talks about this type of service when he's preaching through his greatest hits that we call the Sermon on the Mount. He warns us, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, don't announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward in full. What's their reward? All the notoriety for getting to go do the thing. People noticed me. That's what they're looking for. And guess what? Jesus promises they get it. Now, what's that worth? Nothing. That's nothing. But when you do give to the needy, and we'll be able to insert here, when you do serve, when you do express Christ-like love to others by meeting their needs, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what's done in secret, will also reward you in secret. There is something that happens in the hidden places of our lives that Jesus uses to form us to his image for the sake of others. We can run after all of the serve days and you fill in the blanks you want, but until we choose to, in hiddenness, begin to engage with the things that Jesus is putting in front of us, we will not be formed into people of love that serve others. It reminds me, there was a theologian, Ronald Rolheiser, and he wrote a lot of books, but one of his, it's like 4 chapters long. So if you're ever looking for I'd like to read something, but I'm not a big reader, I've got it for you. It's called The Domestic Monastery. And he talks about how there was a practicing hermit, like a monk, named Carlo Carretto, who practiced a secluded life in the Sahara for about a dozen years in order to give himself over to the Lord and mature spiritually. And while he was doing this, he was translating the Bible for a local Bedouin tribe into their language and just giving himself over to the Lord. And he is, in some ways, beginning to kind of think pretty highly of himself. Like, I live by myself. I serve others. I live a pretty Spartan life. I simple meals. Like, I tend to these goats, and I pretty much just eat whatever I can make from the milk that they have and whatever few vegetables. And then he goes home to visit his mom. And he goes, I don't understand it. I don't understand. I think she's more contemplative than me. She is more mature in her faith than someone who has given himself over to maturing in his faith. How is this possible? Because a lot of times, again, we think there needs to be some big grand gesture or something like this in order to grow in this way and to serve others. And what he realized is that for all of his, let me just read the quote. What this taught him was not that there was anything wrong with what he had been doing as a hermit. The lesson was that there was something wonderfully right about what his mother had been doing all these years as she lived the interrupted life amidst the noise and incessant demands of small children. He had been in a monastery, but so had she. Any mother or father, while raising small children, perhaps in a more privileged way even than a professional contemplative, is forced, almost against the will, to constantly stretch the heart. For years, while raising children, her or his time is never her or his own. Personal needs have to be kept in second place, and every time a parent turns around, a hand is reaching out and demanding something. Now, I recognize that there is a small contingency of this room that still have kids in the home. So the point I'm not trying to make is we can all be more contemplative and mature in our faith by raising young kids, although that's true. But there is stuff in the hiddenness of our everyday life that allow us to put the needs of others first. And as we do, we mature and we get to practice the hiddenness that Jesus was talking about of, I don't need to make this grand show. I don't need to be out in front of people. I just get to serve in the place that God has put me here and now. Each day, in a million ways, we can surrender our own wants, our own rights, our own desires, in order to express the love of Christ by meeting a need. Let me say that again. Each day, in a million ways, we get to, as Jesus followers, because of who he is to us, surrender our own wants, our own rights, and our own desires to express the love of Christ by meeting the needs of others. So our service comes from a place of love. It's formed in hiddenness, and it's defined by our availability. I think of service a little bit like how I think of fasting. How there should be built-in ways that we serve others, and also part of being a person of love and serving others is the ability to be interruptible. To go, my time is not my own. I can serve and love so that others might experience this love. And I tried to hone in on one passage, but all I kept thinking of when we talk about availability is the times in Jesus' life when he was on his way to do something and then was interrupted and presented with an opportunity to serve. He was teaching and preaching in Capernaum, and in Mark 1, a man with an unclean spirit just approaches him, starts shouting, acting a fool. Jesus casts it out. He's in the middle of doing something and says, I'm going to, in the midst of me doing something, I'm going to love and serve. Jesus is teaching in a house. All of a sudden, dust starts to fall from the ceiling. These four friends lower down paralytic in front of him on a mat. Jesus could go, let's pause. Let me finish my thought process here. Let me get to the end of this message. And then we can talk about what this looks like. But no, Jesus took the opportunity to be interrupted and to love and to serve. Jesus is rushing through a crowd. There's Jairus has a young daughter, I think 12 years old, and she's dying. Time is of the essence here. Jesus is pushing through the crowd. Maybe the crowd is pushing in on Jesus. Either way, he's trying to get there. And all of a sudden, he feels something. A woman who had been suffering with an issue of blood for 12 years reaches out, touches the hem of his garment. Jesus stops in order to love this woman, engage with her. Time after time and time again, Jesus proves to be interruptible. What's that mean for us? Well, the modern rule of life that defines our culture is busyness. How can I pack my family into as many activities as possible? How can I go see kids and grandkids and have leisure and you fill in the blank? How can I do as much as possible? And it's not inherently wrong, although I think it does begin to crowd out a little bit of time with Jesus. We ought to be careful. But what I want us to remember this morning is that our lives should not be so booked out and so busy that we do not have the margin to love and serve others. That if a need arises, you fill in the blank. Let's say someone needs a meal. And you go, I can't, I'm swamped. I got too much going on. What? What else could you possibly have going on? It's more important than expressing Christ-like love by meeting the needs of another. That is not to shame anybody or say in all times and all ways you need to be the savior of someone, because you're not. You can't be. But I do think we border on sinfulness when our lives are so busy that we don't have the margin and availability to love and serve others. And all of this leads us to a place where our service is only as good as our kinship, our family. A lot of times we view the ways and means in which we serve as enough in themselves. How can I say that another way? Because I don't feel like that made sense. We view serving as the end in and of itself and not the means to an end. And I think it's more the means to an end, and that means to an end is a place of being formed into a person of love and being a part of a family of love. Which is why our service should not be a person serving and then a person being served. And maybe it starts that way. But over time, there's an expectation from Jesus that we're being formed and fitted into family. I'll tell you where this goes off the rails a lot is when that did not feel good. When upper class or middle class people go into settings where there is destitute poverty and or significant need. And we can very easily show up as I've got answers. I'm a hero. It's not about me, but check out these pictures from this service project or mission trip on social media. And all that does, again, Jesus says, you're getting your reward. Whatever it is that you're looking for, I'll give it to you. When, in reality, the type of service that Jesus is offering to us to meet the needs of another by expressing Christ-like love doesn't leave us as distant, served and serving. It knits us into, we are a family together. We belong to one another. We welcome others in. I think of the parable that Jesus told of the Good Samaritan. These are people who were, you get the priest, you get the Levite that come along, they say, no thanks, too busy. Availability, anybody? Too busy, got things to do, need to go offer a sacrifice. And then the Samaritan comes along. Samaritans were diametrically opposed to the Jewish people. They were hostile. It was not good. He sees the man bleeding out, dying, and goes, I'm going to express love by meeting his needs. So he scoops him up, he takes him to the inn, and he doesn't just go, I've bandaged him up, I'm going to leave him, I can now have a clean conscience. What does he say to the innkeeper before he leaves? If there is any bills that rise above what I'm leaving you, I'm going to be back around to check in. I'll settle up then. And what's the implication of that? When we serve not so that we can feel great about ourselves, but because God is building a family. And in the Good Samaritan and this man that is beaten and bruised, the Samaritan offers, I'm not just going to view you as a project to fix. I am going to walk with you through this road of recovery. Because our service is only as good as our kinship. Because love draws us to a place of kinship, of belonging, of family. A prolonged walking together as opposed to serve and see ya. And I'll tell you something, that type of service, that type of meeting the needs of others is far less glamorous. It's really easy to show up on serve days or wherever and feel great about yourself. It's really hard to serve people over the long haul. It is not easy. And yet, that's the type of love that we are being compelled into portraying for the world and turning ourselves, through the help of the Holy Spirit, into people of that kind of love. So we serve from love. That's the starting point. We serve in hiddenness, where we go, okay, what's Jesus doing in the day-to-day of my life? Not that big expressions are bad. They're just few and far between, and they don't do nearly as much formation in us as we might think. We serve with availability, where we're willing to be interrupted. And we serve not so that we can look like heroes, but we serve so that we can build families. So this week, here's what we're going to do. This is, in some ways, the easiest practice that I've given us. And in other ways, it is hard because I'm giving you multiple practices. This week, I want you to find a way, bear with me, every day where you can express Christ-like love by meeting the needs of another. It could be to a child that's in your home where you go, I'm going to serve you. I'm not going to, you just asked for water 5 minutes ago. I don't want to get you another water. And you go, okay, I'm going to choose to lovingly serve you. Or it could be going and getting your neighbor's mail that's on vacation. Or it could be seeing someone on the side of the road and stopping to help them. There's plenty of ways that you can do this. But every day, in the places that Jesus takes you, I want you to look for a way in which you can serve and meet the needs of others. Okay? And we'll come back together next week, and we'll talk about what it means to practice the witness practice. So before we take off, several of us, and I tried to figure out what context to address this in. I figured this is as good as any, because it seemed to be some larger conversations. And so on this week, there was some concern shared, and they were respectfully brought to me. And I said in that moment, hey, I don't know if I'm able to give you any sort of response in real time. I don't know if that's even necessarily fair to me, so give me a little bit to process through some of that and offer a response. And so I know that reading something that I've written could feel cold and distant, but in an effort to stay on task, I've written it out because I could really just follow some rabbit trails because that's how my brain works. So I'm just going to stick to the paper. Okay. First, I want to sincerely thank everyone who shared their concerns just about some of the changes that have been happening around Cornerstone. And I recognize that some of them have been difficult, and I understand that as I entered into this space, that they may not have been what you expected. And like I said, I appreciate that these concerns were brought forward directly and respectfully, and will continue to encourage us as a body that when we have an issue, that we go to the person in private to discuss the problem for the purpose of reconciliation. So over the last several days, Amanda and I have spent some intentional time in prayer, fasting. We've sought counsel from trusted mentors and friends from our district leadership who are currently, as we think about the district leadership, they're currently providing oversight for Cornerstone during this season of redevelopment that we're in. And after engaging in that process with them, our conviction has not changed, and in fact, I think it's become clearer. The direction that we have begun kind of heading down the path of is a direction that we're going to continue to pursue. And that means that the changes that you've already seen are not temporary, nor are they an experiment that at some point we intend to reverse. It also means that the small things that have changed up to this point, it's also going to continue to mean additional changes that will continue over time as we faithfully sense from the Holy Spirit and do our best to lead the church according to the convictions we believe God has given us, and with the support of the district leadership about how we are to steward the gathering of God's people into the next generation. Now, I recognize that this may be disappointing to some. And so I don't say any of this lightly or without genuine love for each person who calls Cornerstone home. My desire, I know it might seem like a young guy comes in, change for the sake of change.